Good day, good people. Last week, the Church of England updated its guidelines on precautions to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Clearly, the global pandemic is not yet over, and there is considerable uncertainty about the path that it will now take in the United Kingdom as we head towards a more endemic state. Infection rates remain high in some areas, and I have noticed a higher incidence in our congregation this last week than in the previous 2 years. The thinking is that as COVID-19 becomes endemic, it should be possible to respond to the virus in a similar way to other existing respiratory illnesses through sustainable public health measures. The government expects that the population's defences against new variants will continue to strengthen as immunity increases through advances in vaccine technology and repeated exposure to the virus. But I remain conscious that some of our church members are frail and clinically vulnerable. We don't want to spread the virus if we can help it. Nonetheless, the government's objective in the next phase of the COVID-19 response is to enable us to manage it like other respiratory illnesses, whilst minimising deaths and retaining the ability to respond if a new variant emerges with more dangerous properties than, for example, the Omicron variant, which is currently dominant, and which could again threaten to place the National Health Service under unsustainable pressure. In the meantime, we continue to think and pray for all those who work in our medical services. Despite the dropping of legal restrictions, the government continues to recommend sensible measures to limit infection. For example, the guidance for places of worship says social distancing in a place of worship is now a personal choice. It's been like that for some while, of course. People are encouraged to respect other attendees and those working who may wish to adopt a more cautious approach. Regular use of hand sanitizer and/or hand washing is still also recommended. Face coverings are no longer mandatory in any setting, but they are recommended in enclosed or crowded places, particularly where you come into contact with people with whom you don't normally meet. The virus can spread predominantly by droplets and perhaps aerosols, which can linger in the air from coughs, sneezes, and speaking. So, the best available scientific evidence tells us that when used correctly, wearing a face covering can continue to reduce the spread of coronavirus droplets and aerosols in certain circumstances, helping to protect others. Remember, face coverings are largely intended to protect others rather than the wearer from the disease. So, on their own, they're not a replacement for social distancing and regular hand washing or sanitizing, which is why we must continue to make those available. Otherwise, the National Church guidance says that it is up to each individual incumbent to decide. The Parochial Church Council meets next Thursday, and we will discuss what to do at St. Francis as we look forward. But I think taking our cue from the national guidelines, that we might well retain hand sanitising and ventilation wherever we can. And people must make their own decision about whether or not to wear a face covering in crowded places. Perhaps bearing in mind that the purpose of a face covering is to protect others rather than ourselves. We could perhaps consider removing the one-way system and reintroducing the altar rail and return to the choir processing in for the service, as well as a crucifer and acolytes who would also then serve at the altar. When receiving communion, people not wishing to receive the chalice could simply take the bread and then leave. Please do contact myself or Yvette or one of the wardens or anyone on the PCC if you have a view or any advice or wisdom you would like to share or which you would like us to consider. I know that different people have different thresholds of tolerance of the precautions that we have been hitherto maintaining, and we must continue to respect each other's thoughts and feelings on what remains a challenging issue in social intercourse. In the meantime, we continue also to meet online for morning and evening prayer on Facebook and YouTube on Sunday mornings, and on Zoom on Sunday evenings. And with the Tuesday 6:30 p.m. and Sunday 8 a.m. Eucharists, we also have services in church which are quiet and where people are well spaced out. So I do hope that everyone will continue to feel able to connect with God, from whom, in Jesus Christ, there is no social distancing.